as a banker and also as one of the banks, HSBC being one of the banks which has started piloting with a trade finance application on blockchain. As one of the pioneers of using blockchain technology for banking services, where do you see blockchain technology is going for the banking industry? If you can give your views on that and how Bangladesh can take advantage of that development in the international area concerning banking and blockchain.
Thank you, Habib Bhai. It just makes me put on the spot. But first of all, Honorable Secretary Sir, the way that we see him as the architect of what we have gone through, especially in the last 2 years in the macroeconomic area for Bangladesh. So it is a great privilege for me to be in front of him and to say a few words. I don't dare to talk about the macroeconomic perspective, especially from a Bangladesh context, but as much as that I'm here to talk a few things, but as I mentioned in the beginning, that I'm also here to learn, to understand, and so to absorb that what is going to be the forward-looking view of these relevant and topical subjects. Well, when we talk about blockchain, I don't want to go into that details, but yes, we started with 1 or 2 transactions, and I must admit that we could not do these things in a scalable way because it also involves stakeholder and ecosystem graduation to that technological development. So unless that we create a gradual development of the ecosystem, I do not think that we can also make things scalable in a way. We can, of course, test and pilot and go for a few transactional examples, but it also requires all other ecosystems, including all sort of financial ecosystem, stakeholders ecosystem, supply chain ecosystem, and of course the financial institutions. So everything has to talk to each other. I'm talking about mostly from a very broader perspective. But as much as this blockchain actually is the subject matter, but I understand the subject matter is also about the central bank digital currency. And this is where one thing is pretty clear, that it cannot happen in one day. It will happen gradually, and it has to go gradually. So because as I mentioned, that ecosystem actually also has to be developed in a way so that it doesn't create an imbalance with something what is ongoing and effective and also has been there for a long time. But at the same time, that we also have to observe and embrace the technological part. So my view actually would be that while we see that there are a lot of other digital currency, but the very reason about the central bank digital currency is that we require governance, and we require the legal tender and the monetary supply to be very transparent, convertible, and also cyber risk protected, because it cannot happen in one day. So I look forward to discuss later on, but because our Honorable Finance Secretary's time is very limited, I think it will be important for all of us to hear from him. So I will stop there at this moment, Habib Bhai, and of course look forward to engage myself into the further discussion once the keynote paper is presented.
Okay. My follow-up question to you, Mr. Mahbub Rahman, is sure. You said that the pilot that you did, in that pilot, you found that the blockchain application, you found that it was not scalable. So that was one of the limitations.
I didn't say it is not scalable, but for this to make it scalable, it will require for the overall ecosystem to develop.
Ah, okay. Okay. So it was not a technology issue, but
if I said that HSBC is ready, I can claim that one. But for HSBC to be ready, it has to be that other ecosystem also has to be ready.
I will now come to Professor Farooq Sheikh. So if you want to take it from the academia perspective, where do you think academia can add value to this adoption of central bank digital currency So where do you think the universities can play a role in this?
My knowledge is not really that deep to reflect so relevantly to this question, but I have a couple of questions which might enable me to respond to this question. To the Honorable Secretary and Mahbub Shahab, my question is the following. Blockchain is a way of preventing parallel use of money, or parallel line as they call it. So if we are going for central bank digital currency, then they would be having a unique token for every digital coin. Do they need blockchain for that particular kind of currency? Because they should be able to maintain a central ledger where they can always compare and authenticate any particular currency that is used. Do we need blockchain technologies to the level that decentralized cryptocurrencies need? Because one of the problems in scalability is the blockchain itself, because this is distributed ledger, and every time you authenticate a transaction, you have to go over all the blockchain history to authenticate it. So that is a tremendous restriction to scalability itself, my humble knowledge. So what I want to know is, how is the central bank going to have an advantage over decentralized and private, cryptocurrency? There should be some advantage. Okay. What would that be?
Okay. Senior Secretary, Finance Division, would you like to respond to this question first?
Okay, if I correctly understood, let me start from here. Well, cryptocurrency and central bank digital currency is not the same thing. Cryptocurrency is a different one. It is not a legal tender, and there is no central authority to monitor it. But right. Central bank digital currency is a part of the money supply, broad money supply, or M2. Yeah. So this is a basic difference. Well, for digital currency, basically, if you look the current system of central bank operation, central bank does not work directly with the customer, rather through banking system. Yeah. So central bank, whatever money supply is created, is done, or money is created by central bank, it actually routed through the commercial banks only. Yes. Now the customer actually have an account in the commercial bank, and they can transact their money from there directly. So I'm just taking a simple example. Say one person have a bank account in HSBC. So he might have a credit card or debit card, so he can use this bank account and transact and go to the shopping center and use this card. But when digital currency comes in, if I understood correctly from literature, from different literature, then the intermediary bank will disappear. So central bank will be issuing directly, have an account of individuals with them, and they will be using that currency. So right. In that case, central bank might have issued some sort of, it might be a card, it might be a mobile-enabled, system, or a dongle. Anything could be. Right. So in that case, the individual will be using the currency directly, having an account in the central bank. So right. You can call it as a blockchain, but it is not necessarily a blockchain. This is just
it is not. Because it is not blockchain. That's exactly what I was saying. Absolutely. That you are actually making it far more fluid and transparent. You don't need the blockchain because there is a unique token to it. Right. Exactly.
No, actually, let me actually clarify that point a little bit. We also have our keynote speaker also with us, Mr. Charles DeHousey, Managing Director, Consensus for the Asia Pacific region. And we also have Mitya Gorshavsky. Did I pronounce your name right?
Excellent pronunciation.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mitya. So we'll also hear from him. But just to clarify the point, the very fact that CBDC uses tokenization means that it uses blockchain technology. So I will not go into the details of that. I will let Charles address that. So let us, Charles. I have good news and bad news. Good news is that it's not going to be 2.5 hours like you have been told by Ashik. The bad news is that our chief guest, the Senior Secretary Finance Division, Mr. Rauf Talukdar, he has to leave at 6:50 because he has a meeting with the Honorable Finance Minister at 7.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'll so without further ado, what I'll request you to go ahead with your presentation. If we can finish before 6:50, then maybe we can have some response from the Senior Secretary Finance Division before he leaves.
Thank you so much for this context. Just to clarify, that gives me how many minutes for the presentation?
About 15 minutes.
Okay,
I think
excellent.
what would be good, like, the way Habib bhai you started, what would be good to have a bit of an executive summary on this one, and then maybe open the floor and we get to hear from our honorable chief guest, and then maybe you can elaborate further. Otherwise,
right.
we'll not be able to get the chief guest view in tandem.
Absolutely. Feel free to interrupt me or give me some kind of 5-minute left warning so we can have this conversation, which we all look forward to. So I would like to speak to you about CBDCs and decentralized finance. It looks a little bit some kind of sci-fi topic, but we as technologists are seeing this being built before our eyes. My name is Charles Dossi. I'm working with Consensus. Consensus is one of the world's largest blockchain engineering company. Before we start, a little bit of a safe harbor. None of this presentation is an investment advice in any ways. I want to tell you about CBDCs. I want to speak about stable coins, which is also close to the CBDC topic. And we can look later, if we have the time, into decentralized finance and how big it is today. A few words about Consensus. 3 main audiences at Consensus: developers, enterprise, and end users. Eventually, what we are doing is abstracting the complexity of the technology to make it usable for governments, central banks, and commercial banks. We are a partner of numerous government as well as para-government organizations such as the European Commission, the EMEA Singapore, HKMA here in Hong Kong, Banque de France, and many others, as well as the general financial industry. We are the company behind one of the most successful software in smart contract development. We are managing about 110 billion queries on daily basis on the networks we've been building. And if you're familiar with blockchain, we are also the company behind MetaMask, which is one of the most popular today crypto wallet with more than 10 million users. And the good news and the bad news, maybe to come back to your earlier statement, is money is changing, and money is changing again, because it's not the first time money is changing. And what we see coming in certain parts of the world is some early competition between regulated stablecoins and central bank digital currencies. Regulated stablecoins have to be considered by regulators and technologists. Today, it represents about $80 billion of currencies represented into the world of decentralized finance. And it's kind of competing with the Visa, MasterCard, and Alipay of the world. So what is very interesting in our industry is that there is a lot of data available. It's a very transparent infrastructure, so it give everyone an opportunity to step away from the sentiment and build strong convictions out of data coming from the market. CBDCs are obviously a conversation which is very hot amongst many governments, from Europe to US, China, and most of the countries in Asia, obviously. When you talk about CBDCs, there is 2 families of topics. There is 2 subcategories of CBDCs. One is what we call the wholesale central bank digital currencies, which is essentially M0, M1 money. So it's how the central bank will start to distribute money via some new rails, which are blockchain based, to the commercial banks. So that's wholesale CBDCs on one side. On the other side, you've got the retail CBDCs, which is really looking at how CBDC will come down from central banks to commercial banks to payment service providers and eventually to the end users. That's two different topics. In terms of technology, it requires very different architectures. That's important to make the, I would say, the good distinction between both topics of the conversation. At Consensus, we had the chance to work with the MAS Singapore, the Reserve Bank of South Africa, Reserve Bank of Australia, as well as Banque de France on wholesale CBDCs. We are working currently with BIS, PBOC China, HKMA, Bank of Thailand, and CBUAE on cross-border CBDCs. And we've been doing some great works on the retail CBDC with Bank of Thailand and soon with Bank of Korea. So it gives us an early exposure. We are still very humble students of the technology and the regulations around it. But it's really a privilege to have been exposed and hands-on those projects from the early days. So we built over the years many different solutions to enable central banks and commercial banks to manage this new form of money, which comes with many different capabilities, such as programmability, such as automatic AML and KYC, and many other features. I'll take a pause here, maybe before we move on to DeFi, to see if there is some questions and comments from my friends and colleagues on the panel.
Can you go back 2 slides before? I think slide 13 probably. Yeah. So here, the diagram you have shown. Let me understand it correctly. You see the central bank, then commercial bank, and then stores, POS. So you were saying this is also blockchain, right?
Absolutely. So it's a two-tier infrastructure. So it's a two-tier architecture where the central banks really keep the commercial banks relevant and as a close partner of the economy enablement in general. So central banks will distribute CBDCs to commercial banks. Commercial banks will do their job in terms of KYC. They will remain a close partner of the central bank and later on enable merchants and individuals.
So currently, for example, we have central bank core solution, CBS system. So under that, central bank is connected with the commercial banks. And then again, commercial bank is connected with its customers through their cards, like credit card, debit card, or something like that. So this system can be called a blockchain.
If it's a centralized database, if it's a centralized system distributing to different partners, you cannot call it blockchain. The benefit of blockchain eventually for the central banks is to kind of redistribute the cards, building a very inclusive ecosystem where commercial banks and payment service providers will benefit from a shared platform, and the database will be moving from a central database design to a decentralized and shared database design. So it will bring resiliency, and it will bring also a new type of money. Instead of having passive pipes, which are moving money from A to B and B to C, you will be able to design money, which will be what we call programmable money or directional money. So as a central banks, you can imagine ways for you to say, okay, I'm happy to inject liquidity in the economy, but I would like this liquidity to be specifically directed to increasing the salaries or paying for infrastructures. And you can essentially design this currency to be going into the banks for special purposes and being distributed by the banks for special purposes. And having a shared infrastructure between you, central banks, commercial banks, and payment service providers give you also the opportunity to build a live dashboard of your economy. Understanding not only via some quarterly update or annual update from your commercial banks, but getting really a pulse to say, okay, I did inject 100 million in the economy to support SMEs. How is this money being used and what are the results? So it gives you the opportunity of this programmability of the currency you inject in the economy, as well as building a dashboard, understanding what's happening right now in the economy, rather than kind of being reactive sometimes, not because it takes time, but because it takes time for the information to reach you.
Sir, my humble opinion, Honorable Chief Guest, I think you are absolutely spot on and right in identifying the decompositions of the whole thing. What in my humble opinion, sir, that while blockchain will not create the digital central bank digital currency, but central bank digital currency will help blockchain to flourish. So it is not about like blockchain will go to the to help the central bank digital currency. I think the policy and advocacy and as well as the preparedness of the central bank digital currency will help foster the blockchain ecosystem gradually. I think that has to be a little decomposed. That the central bank digital currency is in one hand and the blockchain in the other hand, but the central bank digital currency will actually foster the blockchain environment of the ecosystem, that how gradually that it will evolve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mahbubur Rahman. Let's go to our other speaker, Mitya. So Mr. Mitya Goroshevsky, tell us very briefly about yourself, about a minute, and then please respond to this issue about, CBDCs or stable coins, and how blockchain is evolving to support all these applications. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm a CTO of Ton Labs, and we're the core developer of Freeton blockchain, which is currently technically the fastest blockchain in existence, with like 55,000 transactions per second proven on the distributed, like internet-wide network. And well, because I'm the proponent and advocate of public blockchains, so my voice here will be a little bit maybe controversial in terms of like how do I view this topic and involvement of central banks in the blockchain ecosystem. Because I believe, well, I don't believe in private blockchains. I don't believe in blockchains that run in some kind of closed system, right? For example, between banks or between some other parties. Because, yeah, you technically, it is a blockchain because there are blocks and there are some validation or whatever on the parts of there is a consensus there, which is distributed between these parties. But if you take the blockchain as in a more like philosophical level, when you talk about like not only distributed but decentralized computing, then you cannot call private blockchain a decentralized computing. You can call it distributed computing, but not decentralized. And I argue actually to go a step further in your thinking about how like central banks, and I don't want to to discuss what is really, is there a role for central banks in the future economy? Like this is very controversial, but I'm not going to go there even now. What I'm saying is that if I would be a bank or a central bank, I would think a little bit further and ask yourself, do you really need this closed system? Can't you use the public blockchain infrastructure to, provide your applications, whatever you need as a central bank or for the fiat currency or the digital fiat currency, which is what it is, right? That you want to have. And I would argue you can. Mm-hmm. I would argue you actually don't need to control those servers, don't need to control this network in order to kind of having all the functions that you need from the system, including KYCs as whatnot. You can use the public blockchain. I think this is I would argue to think about this in that direction for the central banks, because the security guarantees that public blockchain provides are much, much, much beyond what you can possibly build with the private network. Right. So just that argument alone. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mitya. I think Mr. Roftalukdar has to leave in 5 minutes. So my last question to him, and Charles, feel free if you want to supplement the question I'm about to ask him. And that is, in terms of, blockchain technology and CBDC, of which it's just an application, adoption of these kind of new technologies itself requires some policy adoption by the government. There is a blockchain strategy by the ICT division, but it's not something that all government across the board has adopted yet. And also the central bank also needs to learn about this new technology and also prepare themselves in terms of the policy imperatives, the regulatory changes that it will entail. So from that perspective, how do you think the government, specifically Ministry of Finance and the central bank, how will they address this issue about learning about this technology and addressing the policy issues that will be involved in adopting this technology today or even 5 years later?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Habibullah. Well, first of all, I would like to say that we need much more sensitization, among the policymakers, central bankers, and also the users, because we have a misconception in Bangladesh. Whenever we say blockchain, it becomes synonym with the Bitcoin. So this is a fundamental problem we have. So we need to I'll not say educate, but make them sensitized that these are not the two things are not the similar. Is a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is number one. Number two, we need to make ready our people, the user first. You see, policy can be done at any point of time. You can import policy. We can learn policy from others. We can copy them. But the problem is, make it work. So for making it work, we need people behind the machine. That is another area. So the campaign you have started, awareing people, especially students that are coming out from university or colleges, that is one of the finest area could be the start with. And secondly, from the government, as I am always saying, that the government is very technology friendly. Government is open to adopt any new technology. You see the hardware. If you compare the hardware, whatever the hardware is using in the US or any other developing country, we are using the same. If you consider the software, all the fancy software we are also using here in Bangladesh. The problem is is the configuration of hardware and software and make the right use of blockchains. So as we are discussing before, our keynote presenter was here. We in the academia side also, the conception is not clear. So we need to start with educating our people, especially the user level. We have very good software engineers, hardware engineers, but that is not the sufficient. So we need people who will be using it, because user is the biggest level, the highest level. And also at the same time, I should say that government is opening up. Government is making most of its service, converting into the digital service, so that people can get service, without coming at the public offices, because coming to the public offices creates some sort of nuisance, especially if it is a tax-related issues. Public is very much, concerned about going to tax-related issues. So we are basically planning to provide this kind of services online. So once we can do that, and this, say for example, income tax return submission, value-added tax, clearance. So if we can, introduce this system online and also tag them with the payment system online, so that will create in future a robust blockchain. So as you mentioned, when I was asking this question and the keynote address rightly mentioned, so I had also confusion about the digital currency, and you clearly mentioned that it should have to have a centralized database and redistribution ledger. So these are the two basic things. Currently, we do have absence in our system, and once we can introduce those, because the central bank is the regulator, they have to come forward with this initiative, and once it is there, I think the fear among the users will go away. So that's it from my side. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay.
And as you mentioned that I have to rush for another meeting, I love to stay more, but maybe in future I will be continuing. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Mr. Rauf Talukdar, the Senior Secretary, Finance Division. For your information, this session is being recorded. So even though you will miss the rest of the program, we will share the recording with you, so you can also listen to it later on. So thank you very much for joining us. We will continue, but feel free to leave at any time. But the rest of us will continue the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, all right. We also have with us Dr. Lawrence Ma, who is the president of the Hong Kong Blockchain Society, and also he's the founder of the International Blockchain Olympiad. 4 years ago, he started that in Hong Kong. So Lawrence, you said that you had some questions about CBDC. Would you like to place your questions now?
Hold on. Let me just.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Hi. This is Lawrence. I'm from Hong Kong Blockchain Society. Based in Hong Kong. CDBC supports, as Charles will know, I think the project with HMA. Is definitely a big topic in the fintech agenda from the MA. Now of course, a lot of country has been experimenting CBDC, as Charles was saying, for more parts of the world. But it seems I just would like to know, from your opinion, I mean, of course, China, I think they are seems like they're pushing up this RMB, but for other country, what do you think is the real time thing when we really have a country like we have significant economy that will have a CBDC go live, and what is needed to overcome before that can happen?
Charles, please go ahead and respond to that. Then we'll hear from Nitya also on this.
Absolutely. Let's all share our thoughts here. Indeed, my personal opinion is I think China will be going live probably around the Olympics in early next year. In China, they've been already deploying their CBDC as an experiment in 12 cities all over China. There is more than 50 million eCNY wallets which have been activated. So China is definitely has a head start among the other countries. I think the next wave of CBDCs will not be for you and me. It will be for banks and financial institutions. It will be wholesale CBDCs. And there is right now a race, and why this agenda of CBDCs has accelerated so much over the past years is the central banks have seen the private sector, very large banks or very large tech companies such as Facebook, starting to think of having their own currencies or having their own version of the dollar or their own version of any currencies. And that was a big risk for central banks, which were probably thinking about CBDCs, but without any sense of urgency. So it was some kind of a wake-up call. So I guess China will be definitely, I will say, the gold medal, if I can say so, into Olympiad event. I think it's the right terms here. And then the other countries, the jury is still out for who will be the first one to deliver wholesale CBDC. What is very interesting is China decided to take a road which is very different from other countries. China central bank started with retail CBDCs, whereas most of the other central banks started with wholesale CBDCs. In a way, wholesale CBDCs are a little bit easier. It's very large amount transactions, but the number of transactions is smaller. Usually you develop your wholesale CBDC with banks you are regulating yourself. So it makes also a very collaborative environment. But I guess wholesale CBDCs are the next on the line. But you have to keep an eye on the stable coins. And I think one of the biggest challenge for central bank digital currencies is what will be the value proposition and what will be the momentum of privately issued currencies. And we might have the choice in the coming months or years to choose a US dollar from the Fed, a US dollar from Goldman Sachs, or maybe a US dollar from Facebook. So money will start to be branded in a way. And I guess they will all live next to each other. And depending what you want to do, maybe a Facebook dollar will be a good fit for certain type of transactions, and a Goldman Sachs dollar for some others. But this will give a little bit of a boost and competition to central bank digital currencies. And depending which country you are, some regulation will have to be adjusted as well. to welcome this kind of digital asset representing the national currency.
Okay. So, Nitya,
question.
Yes, I'll come back to you,
Yeah.
Professor Farooq Sheikh. Just let's hear from Nitya first. Okay.
Well, you invited the crypto anarchists to the panel, so like my view on that would be a little bit radical, you know. But well, I hope that will provide some pepper to the discussion anyway. So I do believe in stable coins, but I do only believe in algorithmic stable coins, meaning that I don't believe in stable coins which are basically based on some inputs from the what we call the real world, right? But I do believe in stable coins that will provide, because we need we need a currency, right, that will be inflationary currency, and that's what fiat currency is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the usual cryptocurrency, they are almost all deflationary. But but of course, that is not something you want to spend, right? People don't want to spend deflationary currency; they want to spend inflationary currency, and they want to spend because you, as a central bank, need people to spend money faster. You want inflationary currency, of course, because that stimulates economy. So yeah, so the stable coins are a way to provide this inflationary currency on like a global universal basis. Now the question, and I agree with Charles on that totally, the question is, can you compete with that? And like my prediction, you can't. But of course, you know, yeah, it will be hard sell inside of your organizations. So I would say this. I think if you want to, because the world becoming global, right? And of course, you can act like China if you are China, right? You have a population of like 1/7 of the world, more or less or more. And you can say, okay, you know, I am the world, right? And I can, right? And with that view, of course, then you can create certain things inside and experiment in what you want to do inside this very large, you know, economy. And I don't want to go deeper into that. But if you are smaller and you are more depending on other countries, and we are becoming a more and more global world, and we need more and more universal solutions, right? So when you think inside, you know, walls of your central bank and your policy and whatever, again, you are not competing against another central bank in a way. You're not competing against another economy today with this. You're competing against stablecoin, which is completely universal, works everywhere, like anyone can use. Don't need anything, right? So think, I would think, if I would be you, like I would think, how can I create such a central bank controlled inflationary currency that will somehow compete, and what can I propose to what value I can give, right?
Okay, thank you, Nitya. I think this concept about inflationary and deflationary currency, you know, you should have mentioned that while the Senior Secretary of Finance was here. Anyway, that's a good thought. So let me come back to Professor Farooq Sheikh for his question. Please go ahead.
I had a question, but before I could go on, I think Nitya's points are very interesting. I would like to say that, you know, like a CBDC, right? I mean, just a new term for me. CBDC is inevitable. That I mean, I understand the pros and cons, but this was going to happen. When private currencies are coming in, the central bank will not be a, you know, idle, you know, spectator. It's going to come in, and it has advantages to it. But my question is the following: is it possible to imagine a world, however globalized it is, that the currencies, private currencies, might evolve that will be specialized for certain kind of transactions, might form a club of participants of that particular kind of currency? It is possible to imagine that. My feeling is the way governments are politically active in the area of controlling other adversaries, this is inevitable. It is not just currency function.
No, I think that's a very good question. I think Charles indicated that, but Charles, would you like to elaborate on that question?
The background of this technology of blockchain is actually building what we call Web3. So you've got the third generation of internet being built before your eyes. And the Web 1 was the web of information. You were connecting to a website and you were consuming content. Web 2 has been the web of social media, the Facebook and the WhatsApp of the world. And Web 3 is the internet of value, where You get an internet powered by blockchain technology where you don't need to have these centralized entities and brands kind of organizing your social life and your content, but it's much more direct one to another between the users without any need for a trust kind of center or point. So that's really the Web3, and probably we will start to see some new kind of unit of accounts. I don't want to call them currencies. I think it's too premature. But we will see communities, as Mr. Farouk mentioned earlier, which might go with their own values and with their own unit of accounts for exchanging services or content and anything related to payment in their opinion. So yes, I think there is a lot of competition coming up for the legacy money. And CBDCs is one opportunity for governments to remain relevant into these real digital economies which are being built right now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, good. Mr. Mahbub Rahman, did you have a question?
No, I think rather than question, what I would say that if we want to contextualize this with Bangladesh, because as we are happening, of course, we are a part of an international ecosystem when it comes to the digital currency or the central bank digital currency. As much as I mentioned that it is happening, what is the pace that you see that Bangladesh as an emerging country, what could be the starting point? Of course, the money supply, legal tender, the governance is something that of a prima facie importance when it comes to the central bank digital currency, because I think the reason that it started with CBDC, the digital currency concept actually has started with all other things that I don't want to talk about these things as a well-governed institutions. But what I understand that HSBC has been a part of some of the discussion with some of the other countries' central bank, where the CBDC is being mulled over. The point is that if I may ask Mr. Charles, that what is, to your opinion, that we as an emerging market should start doing, and then how do we scale it up, and what's the pace that we should adopt? Of course, that necessarily always don't remain within our control, because we have to respond to the other ecosystem of the international perspective. But I see in a pseudo form, digitizing currency, like when it starts the the mobile financial services. And then, the government is mulling over about the interoperability, which is in a way a bit in progress to go to the digitizing the currency governed by the government. So again, these are symptomatic evolution that the country is already making in a way. So how do you see that the central bank and the ministry and other for an emerging market like Bangladesh should adopt, and what kind of an intensity, and where to start really?
That's a very important.
I'll just Charles, before you respond, I'll just supplement that question. So basically what is happening in Bangladesh, under this digital Bangladesh trust of the government, so there is a tremendous emphasis on digitizing public services and citizen services. So digitization is happening. But the trend towards one that Mitya was saying is a distributed database, and the next step would be decentralization. So in that progression, where do you think a country like Bangladesh, so in response to Mahbub Shah's question, if you can respond to it, including that. Go ahead.
I think that's a very important question. It's a great mindset to ask these questions in a very positive way. The way I will do of things I've seen in some other central banks, they will reach out to the World Bank, to the IMF, to the BIS, to raise their hand and say, we have an appetite to explore this. Is there some standards or some template we should be following? There is a policy, a CBDC Policy Kit, which has been issued by one of these organizations. I think it's the IMF, which are really helping the regulators to accelerate the learning curve. And keep in mind that blockchain is a collaboration technology. So you can look at it as an engineer, as decentralized database, but eventually it's a collaboration and coordination technology. So reach out to some of your counterparts, should they be commercial counterparts in the region here in Asia or more far away in the US and Europe, and raise your hand and say, we have an appetite to experiment, we have an appetite to learn and join your working groups. And it starts with a couple of phone calls and sometime a WhatsApp, because as influential people in technology or central bankers, we have this connectivity and join projects. Think also of how relevant will your currency remain if it is on the right rails. If your currency needs to be FXed via some old legacy system and it takes 2 or 3 days, most probably the markets, the commercial partners of Bangladesh, should they be buying from Bangladesh or Bangladesh buying from them, will naturally kind of pivot to a more easy way of transacting. So you really want to keep this open mind that you are clearly broadcasting today, and raising your hands and inviting you at tables and meetings, honestly. And it starts, from what I've seen, it starts in very simple ways. And from this first collaboration, they start a POC, which become cross-border. And suddenly you've got like 20 engineers of your team, which are working with 50 engineers from 3 other countries. So I guess don't overthink too much, and just invite you at many tables as you can to accelerate your learning curve.
Okay, thank you. So, Charles, I have one additional point here, and the point that also Professor Farooq Sheikh made, and also you also said that, for example, JP Morgan can have their own digital currency, Walmart can have it, or Facebook can have it. So, in that respect, one interesting thought is that HSBC actually prints the money in Hong Kong. So it actually works like the treasury in Hong Kong. So, conceivably, HSBC can also issue, let's say, digital currency in Hong Kong, or if, let's say, the Central Bank of Bangladesh allows, then a bank like them could also issue a digital currency in this country. So, what is the probability of such evolution in other parts of the world, or is that something you think is going to be, aggressively regulated as central banks usually are?
Another important question. I think some countries will be very restrictive about such opportunities of having private money issued. Some others will understand that they want to keep the bank and empower the bank, and they want to give to the banks a new generation of money so they can be more efficient into their KYC and AML. They can be more efficient in their operations as well. So it's not black and white. It's a lot of different context. If you are in China, you want the renminbi to be issued exclusively from the central banks. If you are in America, we will know in the coming months what is the stand of the Federal Reserve over there. If you are in some other part of the world, some of the central banks will essentially regulate and give the right to some of their commercial banks to participate more actively in the economy. So I think it's a good conversation to have. It's a lot of research to understand why other countries are doing things in such ways. But I guess keeping only one single currency is probably containing the innovation and limiting the inclusivity of the new finance. Okay. And if you need to be exclusively a regulated bank or exclusively another regulated institutions, you're ultimately limiting a little bit the innovation in your ecosystem. So as policymakers, you want to keep things under control, but you want to keep a certain level of openness and inclusivity, so you don't have financial players which might sleep a little bit in their laurels, if I can say so, and maintain a certain level of competition and inclusivity again. So you can benefit from the innovation from the tech companies if your banks are not innovating fast enough.
Okay, so I mean, coming from that,
1 or 2 points. I think.
Okay, but before that, if I may just ask one question to Mitya on that, is that what you are raising the issue that the central banks have to, on the one hand, regulate the market, and on the other hand, be open to innovations. So what that means is they have to learn about the overall blockchain ecosystem and the digital currencies. Where do you think the market is going, Mitya, in that respect? Because you in your earlier speech you said you were a strong proponent of public blockchains and not permission private blockchains.
Yes, that's true. Well, I think that you need to think where developers are going, and because the developers are the force of innovation in the new fintech applications and stuff like that they're building, and we will see more and more on that. And today you have a decentralized public blockchains where developers can express themselves very freely today, despite some regulations that we have already. And that is going to continue that trend because people want to program money, and now they have a way to program money. And now they have also scalable blockchains that can program money, because up until now you don't actually, because like think of that, like the amount of transactions you can put into today's blockchains are so minimum. You cannot put a lot of applications, a lot of people there. It will be just crashing and it will cost huge amounts of money. Now the new wave of scalable blockchains are coming, and this limit is like there is no more of that limit. So you can actually have like billions of people using these applications, and I don't have anyone to ask to launch it. I can do it myself. I can write a program and launch it. So now think about you as a central bank, and that's happening in your economy. If you're not joining that somehow, if you're not allowing this innovation, it will happen despite your efforts. It will happen somewhere else, and the people will still use it, unless you want to put everyone in jail, which you don't, I hope.
Okay, so I'll come back to that. Regulatory perspective. But let's hear from Mr. Mahbub Rahman. You wanted to supplement what Charles was saying. Please go ahead, Mahbub.
Look, and thank you. Look, I think, what also we heard from our chief guest before, is that we get to demystify the things. So people's understanding, people's usage and understanding a bit more. So once we demystify, I think the currency for an emerging market where the capital control is also there, it has to involve transparency, of course, the legal tender and the money, then convertibility. So transparency, convertibility, and also it has got like an sort of an stability, because the transparency and convertibility will also take. Because if the money is digitized, then also there are some digitizing in that pure sense of CBDC, then it also has got some risk of impact of market ecosystem, because that has to be also ready. But I do take the point of Mr. Charles and Mr. Mitya is that there has to be a start. So once we demystify, then we need to start, and we need to see that how some transitions of coexistence of the current money supply, the money system, as well as the digital. Otherwise, it will never happen. So what we all have to take cognizance of the risk, because as I said, that to your point, Habib bhai, that whether any bank will issue currency on behalf of the central bank, that also has to be backed by that legal tender. Because when it comes to the digitizing the currency, not the notes and the cash as such, but it will also require and that kind of a governance. I will not say regulate. The regulator and the governance has got two distinct interpretations. Of course, that not all regulations are governance, but all the governance are somehow the regulations. But it
end up in regulations. Yes.
Yeah, it has to evolve. But the coexistence and transition is the thing that we need to embrace gradually.
Okay. All right. Now, thank you. Only one question I have to, Charles and Mitya, either one of you can respond. I understand that if you have a digital currency, then convertibility by default is not an issue. And you don't need to convert it to other currency, because it itself is a freely flowing currency which you can use for any transactions. You actually remove that convertibility layer. So can you respond to that?
That's devil is in the details, and your question is a good question, but it's a hard question as well. As a government, as it was mentioned earlier by Mr. Mahoub, is some currencies will have restrictions, domestic restrictions, so that you just support and follow the guidance of the central banks. So it doesn't stop you to have a CBDC, but probably the CBDC will be designed in a way that it will not disrupt too much the central bank policy and the country monetary policy, which is very important. We tend to look at the technology and thinking how fast we can go or how easy and nice it can be as an application, but we are touching the currencies of millions of people, and a country can be destabilized for that. So we need to be aware why also for regulators and central banks, why it takes so much time and why there is so many considerations, and help them with their progress. But you can either abstract the conversion of currencies, or you can automate the swapping, what we call swapping of currencies from one to another. So there is systems which allows you to do what we call the atomic swaps or atomic transactions. So that there is just a piece of software which will be doing an escrow. If I send you US dollar, you have to send me euros or any other currencies. Then there will be an escrow contract which will make sure I comply with what I decided to do with you, and you also comply with this. And then when the two conditions are matched, everyone gets what he's supposed to do. So it's a complicated topic because it's a mix of technology, and there is actually a lot of work on regulations, and we need to be patient also. The internet was not built in 1 year and a half. It started with intranet, and then the internet started to gain more and more bandwidth and getting more and more connectivity. And I guess the new generation of money will probably start in more constrained environment before opening step by step to probably public networks when the time is just the right time by regulators. Okay.
Nitya, do you want to add anything to that?
No, not really. I think the way for also to look at that from different perspectives is think about that as automation. The blockchain will allow a lot of financial automation. And I think that's something central banks should really look at. Because today you take the metrics for your decisions. Like what does central bank really? You decide how much money to print or how much money to provide liquidity for the banks, right? You base this decision on some analysis of your economy, right? Well, if you put more of your economy into the blockchain, it will allow you to analyze these things, and sometimes even automatically, because everything is transparent.
I see. Okay.
You can put an algorithm on the network, and then this network can decide what to do actually with your money supply, whatever. Right. So I think that's another way to look at like inclusion on the blockchain and in the central
that's a beautiful
automation
approach actually, because what you're saying is the monetary policymakers can actually have real-time data to make their help with their
they can make certain decisions even automated on the network.
Automated way, in an automated fashion. Yeah. So Lawrence, any last thoughts?
No, I guess there's still a lot things like as Charles saying, different between retail. For example, when it comes to retail CBDC, the question around inclusion, what happens if, let's say, people don't have a mobile phone? I mean, so you need maybe coexistence of both the digital way. How do you handle that, and how to handle privacy, for example? People will worry. I mean, cash is probably the most private thing. I give the cash, no one know about it. But if this is on the blockchain, you can track to the last detail. So how do you balance that, right? So these are the things that need to be thought carefully.
I think very good point about the data privacy, because when it becomes digitized and all the financial crime, then the data privacy, then of course the overall market ecosystem impact that has to be considered. I think Mr. Charles summarized this very well, that it has to be designed in a way that, like, you have a capital control. How do you design this one not to just convert it when one go to a different currency? So there has to be some control and design aspect of it.
But I want to complement that thought, that question of Lawrence, that with fiat money, you actually can have a private transaction, nobody will know about it. But with digital currency, is there any scenario where you can actually have private transactions without the knowledge of any third parties?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Zero knowledge proofs, for example.
But that makes
certain encryption.
Then you're adding another layer. Then you're adding another layer of technology.
But the thing about zero knowledge proof is that these are very new technology. We don't know whether they are really can be trusted. But I mean, when I talk about cryptography, I mean, they need to be used many years. Like people attack them and see there are no loophole. Zero knowledge proof is nice. I mean, I like zero knowledge proof, but being a new technology, it's not clear that thing is really. I mean, all the bugs or the holes have been,
yes and no, because in cryptography, as you know, it's a race. Like all the algorithms becoming obsolete all the time. So actually, the fact that it's a new technology, if it's proven, doesn't mean that you cannot use it. The problem is that if you will wait to use them for 10 years, they probably will be going broken.
Okay.
There is maybe very, very quickly, Mr. Karim, if I may, there is two challenges, maybe three challenges, let's be honest, for CBDCs. Number one is privacy, and we touch on it. There is technology available, but it has to be proven. It has to make the central banks comfortable. Right. Zero knowledge is one technology we are exploring very actively, but privacy, CBDCs will need to comply with privacy laws. And that's not an easy part to comply with. The second part, the second challenge is scalability. Why so many central banks are starting with wholesale CBDCs? Because you don't need so much scalability. When you only deal with, let's say, 300 banks, but dealing with 20 million customers is a very different ball game. So looking at scalability
or
and
even
how
a
you can
billion.
really deliver. Or even
a billion, like in China.
Even a billion, exactly. So everyone will have his own problem, his own scale, but it's something which still need a lot of work. And the last one is ensuring there is cyber security. Decentralized systems are safer by design, but you're also as safe as the weakest part of your network. So it's a very exciting technology. It's definitely coming. We need all to be patient, even though we are all super excited, and we are building bricks. We are building bricks in our respective industries and companies. But I guess wholesale CBDCs will appear within the next 24 months, and you still need to wait a good 3 to 5 years before you get massive retail CBDCs. But maybe what we will learn from China will help us to accelerate on some other parts of the world.
Okay, beautiful. So if there are no further questions, then I want to thank all of you. Mahbub, do you want to have any last thoughts about HSBC's involvement with blockchain?
Great to be here, and thanks for organizing. I think you started the first step of making the people aware and the ecosystem aware that this is coming. And also great to see the international participants, because it also gives us a window of what is happening and how the expertise are actually building up. So it is very inclusive, and I just want to thank the organizer and especially you to take the lead. But it cannot stop here. It's just the beginning. And I would hope that these engagements with the ecosystem, especially with the policymakers and why not the central bank governors also, to bring into because that's the reality that is happening.
Into the dialogue, yes.
Coexistence will happen. And to Mr. Charles' point that internet has not come into the one day. I mean, today we are using banking transaction anyway. And let's see how it goes. But thanks once again for everyone. And I also get to have the chance to learn. And for that, I thanks to the international participants also. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So it's a wonderful session we have had. So we are talking with Mr. Mahbubur Rahman, the Managing Director and CEO of HSBC Bangladesh, with Mr. Charles Dehaussy, Managing Director Asia Pacific of Consensus, and Mr. Mitya Goroshavsky, right?
You can just leave it at Mitya,
CTO,
you know.
Goroshavsky, yes. That's the CTO of Ton Labs, and Dr. Lawrence Ma, the President of the Hong Kong Blockchain Society and founder and CEO of Imali.io, a blockchain startup in Hong Kong. And we also had earlier today, a few minutes ago with us, who had to leave before 7 because of another meeting, our chief guest, Mr. Rauf Talukdar, the Senior Secretary of the Finance Division of the Government of Bangladesh. So I want to thank you all for joining us on the sidelines of the International Blockchain Olympiad 2021, which is happening right now. So we have 50 contestants from 12 countries competing for $40,000 in prizes. Please do visit the event. It's, anyone can join. IBCOL 2021.com. That's the site, live site. So anyone can join with their email. Thank you for joining us. And there are other seminars also on the sidelines. Tomorrow, Lawrence will be moderating a very important seminar on identity and privacy at 6:30 in the evening Dhaka time, which is 8:30 in the evening in Hong Kong. And also we'll have another seminar on blockchain use in government at I believe that's at 3:30. So with that, I want to thank you again and all the online viewers who have tuned in. So we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lawrence, HKU,
Thank you so
my
much.
alma mater.
Thank you.
And great to be here to see you guys from Hong Kong joining. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Same here. Same here. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.